So good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for what promises to be a groundbreaking morning of, or grounding morning of storytelling through literature and song. My name is Maria Figueroa, and I'm a faculty member here in Letters, also a co-coordinator of the Puente program, along with the fabulous Sinar Lomeli, who's back there. And I'm also Academic Senate President-elect. So I'm very, very excited and honored to be here today and to introduce, I'm not gonna formally introduce the presenters today. The students are, the Puentistas are. In recognition of Miracosta's commitment to students' academic and personal success, and in conjunction with the California Puente statewide project, who is celebrating its 35th year this year, we felt it imperative here at Miracosta as the Miracosta College flagship learning community to honor this work and to honor the work of Puente and all of the excellent support that it's given through the organization and the presentation today. So in collaboration between academic departments like the Letters Department, English specifically, literature, and student equity, we're very, very excited and we feel honored, and what great, possibility to be able to host an award-winning author as well as a recognized folk musician who's a local, right, from San Diego or from the North County, and who actually taught for Miracosta, so I know, Joel Rafael. So to do the formal introductions today for the presentation, I'd like to introduce two exemplary Puentistas. If I can have Stephanie Netro and Philippe Sedom please come and do the honors. Thank you, and let's give them a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Stephanie Netro, and I'm majoring in music, and I'm on the events committee in Puente.
I'm Felipe. I'm a first-year Puentista and co-treasurer of the Puente Club. My major is undeclared.
We have a very special guest author and musician who will be reading and performing for us today.
In our English 50 Puente class, we've been reading and discussing the book All They Will Call You.
The book is based on a plane crash in Los Gatos Canyon that occurred on January 28, 1948, killing 32 passengers, 28 of whom were Mexican broceros.
The pilot, co-pilot, flight attendant, and immigration officer were all named individually, but the 28 Mexican braceros were left unmentioned in the media and were instead labeled deportees. Furthermore, they were buried in a mass unlabeled grave.
This opened my eyes to the reality that some people are not treated with fairness or proper respect.
At first, I didn't really understand why calling them deportees was such a big deal. But after reading each passenger's individual story, it made me realize that each of them has a story to tell.
This book opens up a new perspective about how broceros were treated and how Mexicans lacked an identity in the United States mainstream media.
The author does a phenomenal job in rehumanizing the Mexican braceros.
Our guest author has written multiple novels and poetry collections. He has also won a number of awards, including the 2006 American Book Award from the Before Columbus Foundation and the James Juval Phelan Award from the San Francisco Foundation. His debut novel, Breathing in Dust, was featured on NPR's All Things Considered and went on to receive the 2010 Primo Aslan Award in Things Considered, and went on to receive the 2010, Small Things received in 2014 Colorado Book Award.
His novel Mañana Means Heaven was also released in 2013 and received the 2014 International Latino Book Award in historical fiction. Featured as one of the 4 finalists for the inaugural Freedom Plow Award from the Split Rock Foundation for his research on locating the victims of the plane wreck in Los Gatos Canyon, our guest author has been featured in the Los Angeles Times, New York Times, CNN, Public Radio International, and National Public Radio.
He holds a BA in Writing and Literature from Naropa University and an MFA from Bennington College in Vermont. He continues to speak and perform across the United States and internationally. Currently, he is dedicating his time as a full-time assistant professor in the University of Texas, El Paso's bilingual MFA in creative writing program.
On behalf of the Miracosta Puente program, we would like to welcome Timsy Hernandez.
And folk musician Joel Rafael.
Thank you, everybody. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here in San Diego and here especially at Miracosta. Thank you, Maria, and the wonderful staff and all of the folks who made this possible. Before we get started, I invited my good friend Joel Rafael, who's a wonderful and well-known, internationally recognized folk musician who carries a lot of powerful messages in his songs, which is really, it's the whole reason why I'm here. It's the whole reason why what led me on this search was the power of songs to carry messages across time. So Joel Rafael continues to sing all around the world in that tradition. And so to start off this whole presentation, before I get started, I thought, what better way than to kick a party off with some music? So wonderful. Let's have a round of applause for Joel Rafael.
Oh, thank you, Tim. It's such a pleasure to be working with such a good friend and such an accomplished author in support of such awesome work that you've done. And I'll say, for songs for a party, these might not be the happiest songs, but I think relevant to the occasion. So, one of the things I learned when I met Tim was that the victims of the plane wreck at Los Gatos, a song written by Woody Guthrie that I'd been playing for many years, that they were braceros, that they were part of the bracero program, that they were not undocumented workers. And I learned about the bracero program, which is something I had heard of, but I never really knew what it was, even though I'd lived here in North County since 1972, which was about 10 years, 8 or 10 years before, or after, I should say, the bracero program ended. It ran from approximately 1942 until about 1962 or 64, and then it kind of trailed on for a few years after that, even though it had ended. But things haven't changed that much. For the migrant workers that come north now from when the bracero program existed. And so this is a song called Sierra Blanca Massacre about an event that happened in Sierra Blanca, Texas. I believe it was in 1987. And I saw a newspaper article that told the story of these migrant workers who had camped in a boxcar in the small town of Sierra Blanca Massacre. And someone, as a practical joke, came along, decided they would slam the door closed. And no one knew they were in there. And of course, it gets very hot in that part of Texas. And so all but one person perished. And, but there was a diary found there by a gentleman named Rosario Caldera Salazar. And in it was taken a poem called The Illegal. Some of the passages from the journal were shared in the newspaper article that I found, and so I took those words and some of my own words and put together this story. In my country, for a better life, even say goodbye to my friends, not to my grandparents, nor to my parents. Rosario Caldera Salazar said, Rosario Caldera Salazar said, alone I cried, witness, only God knew my sorrow and shame. I didn't leave you one single cent, alone I left my country in pain. Alone I left my country. In Texas, Mexico, and Houston, Dallas and San Antonio. They all fit here inside of his heart. Oh, her borders so far apart, even though her borders so far apart. Estados Unidos, bonito, los Estados Unidos, Illinois, California, and Tennessee. Over on the other side of the sky still belongs to me. Piece of the sky still belongs. Some words, victims found inside a boxcar in a small Texas town. On the outside, in spite of their plea, inside it was 130 degrees. Inside it was 130 degrees. Didn't even say goodbye to the boys. Drink to my friends like we used to do. Now I'm out here way over the line. Eagle, this is you. Your friend, the old eagle. Goodbye to El Paso when I crossed that big river on the root of the tree. I never knew how soon I'd be yearning for the land that I love and my family. For the land that I love and my family. Some words from found inside a boxcar in a small Texas town. The outside, in spite of their pleas, inside was 130. Inside was 130. Thank you. So, when Tim and my friend, Tim's other friend, Lance Canales, decided to stage an event, basically, up in Fresno to honor these victims from the Los Gatos plane wreck. It was an incident that I found really interesting because the Latino community knew about the grave. They knew there was a grave with 28 Mexican nationals with a small marker at Holy Cross Cemetery, and the people that were folk singers in the area, they knew about Woody's song. But people hadn't really connected the two until Tim and Lance kind of put this together and decided to do something for the people. And I heard about it. Actually, I got an invite from Tim because I was on a list of people that had worked with Woody Guthrie's material. I have 5 co-writes with Woody Guthrie that were given to me by the Woody Guthrie Archives. And so, of course, I wanted to go because this is a song that's part of the folk canon for like over 60 years. People have been singing this song. Woody never sang the song. He was too ill at the time that it was completed to play the guitar and to sing it. But when I went up there, that's when I learned about the Bracero program and found out that these victims were not undocumented, but part of the Bracero program. And I sat down next to a gentleman named Juan Martinez, who is from Salinas. In fact, when I call him, he always says, "Hello, this is Juan Martinez from Salinas." And he's an activist. He was a bodyguard for Cesar Chavez when he was in college. And actually got himself arrested when Cesar was put in the jail in Monterey County. He got himself arrested so he could be in the jail to protect Cesar inside, and was there when Ethel Kennedy and Coretta Scott King came to visit him, and has been a life work of his to get a section of the 101 highway named as the Bracero Memorial Highway. And he told me about his event. Now, it was really interesting to me that less than 100 miles from each other, about 100 miles from each other, I think, Fresno and where he was working on this other project, these 2 wonderful projects were happening, and neither one knew about the other. He heard about Tim's project like a few days before, and the people that ended up, a lot of them from the Fresno area going to his project, found out about it because he was there and told them that a section of the highway was going to be dedicated as the Bracero Memorial Highway. Well, it was an educational experience for me, even though I had a very strong awareness of the immigrant and migrant situation here in North County from living here for 37 years in the house that I actually lived in this area for 45 years. But I got home and I just felt like I needed to write a song to honor the Braceros. And so this song is called El Bracero. It just kind of tells the story of the program. Said, "Bring the Mexicans." 1942. Left the fields for the war. There's too much work to do. El Bracero, fields grow the food. Troops, the allies, and the nation, truly part of the greatest generation. This sack of potatoes, full of tomatoes, and bending down with a short-handled hoe. A song, zero. A sack or the bushel, paid by the hour. Get that shower, a long hot day, paid with only a coupon, post to rely on, to exchange for cash at the bank back in Mexico. See the sack of potatoes, full of tomatoes, and bending down with a short-handled hoe. A song, zero. The Canyon de los Gatos, 14 when the truck van exploded, 32 when the train hit that bus. We died without our name. parallel highway runs from Soledad to Chular, through the fields where we worked and slept beneath the stars. A bolsa de papas, tomate, hombre agachado con su botón. Este es un cero. Good.
Thank you. Another round of applause for Joel, Raphael. I'm going to take you back a little bit before I jump into this story. Actually, first I should tell you, the way that I'm going to present these stories is actually the way one might come across when you start to investigate a plane crash. You start to find, obviously, the plane crash itself becomes symbolic. The plane crash, right? If you were to come upon a plane crash, what you would find essentially are fragments of pieces of things, right? Pieces of the materials, pieces of stories, pieces of evidence. You would find everything in pieces and fragments, right? And that's how I actually began to do the research, was to be okay with the fragmentation, to be okay with all the various pieces that I was going to find as I went around searching for what happened and also the families. So that's also how I tell these stories, is in fragments, because I believe that if I tell you enough of these stories in different pieces, that you all will use your own humanity, your own experiences, your own knowledge to kind of put the pieces together and see the big picture, all right? So that said, that's my justification for jumping around. That's what I'm going to do, jump around a little bit. But first I'm going to start by taking you back to 1948. January. How many of you were born in 1948? No? Oh, man, what a disappointment. On January 28th, 1948, at approximately 4:30 in the morning, on a Wednesday morning at 4:30, pilot Frank Atkinson and his wife, Bobby Lillian Atkinson, were living in their home in Long Beach, California, not too far from here. And Frank received a phone call from his boss. How many of you like phone calls from your bosses at 4:30 in the morning? Well, that was Frank's job, so he was okay with it. So his boss gets on the phone and says, Frankie, we have your assignment for the day. And he says, what's that? And he says, today you're going to actually drive down to Burbank. You're going to fly a Douglas DC-3 airplane all the way down to Oakland. You're going to land in the Bay Area there in Oakland. You're going to pick up, waiting for you there will be an immigration officer by the name of Frank Chaffin, and reportedly 28 Mexican passengers. And those Mexican nationals are going to be flown back to El Centro on the San Diego border. You guys know where the Centro is at, right? All right, let's see. Here we go. Frankie and Bobby. And Frankie says, okay, sounds good. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll get up, get ready to go, put on my suit. They say, one more thing, Frankie. The stewardess who usually goes with you is sick today. She's canceled. Is there any chance your wife would want to go with you and we pay her? And Frankie says, well, I can ask my wife, honey, would you want to come along? And she says, sure, I'll go. And in fact, actually 2 weeks before that day, just 2 weeks before that day, Bobby had called Frankie's sisters because they were living in New York, all the way in New York. That's where they were from. So she was calling home, and she was talking to Frankie's sisters. And they were saying, don't you worry about Frankie flying around all the time and all that? And she says, well, if anything were to ever happen to Frankie, I would want to be with him. 2 weeks before this day. So on this day, on January 28, 1948, she would have her opportunity. She says, yes, I'll go. So the two drive down to Burbank, and a co-pilot by the name of Marion Ewing from Balboa Park drove down and meets them. So all three of them board the airplane and they fly and they land in Oakland. No problems at all. There on the tarmac waiting for them, just like they were told, is immigration officer Frank Chaffin with the 28 Mexican nationals, all in line. This is not the actual photo of them, but this is a photo taken from that same time period. The Mexican nationals who were being deported by a Douglas DC-3 airplane. I love that this guy's staring at you. What are you looking at? It's a pretty heavy stare, actually. So they land there. Everyone boards without incident. The plane takes off at approximately 9:30 in the morning. It takes flight. How many of you have ever flown in an airplane? Raise your hand. Wonderful. Well, you're going to feel really good after this story. So, so, and imagine being the author who has to fly around everywhere talking about a plane crash story. You know, it's like, man. Sometimes you're in the airplane and somebody will say, so what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm an author. Oh, really? What are you working on? You don't want to know. I'll tell you once we land. So they take off from Oakland, California at 9:30 in the morning. And the plane sets sail now. It's leaving Oakland. It's flying over that beautiful Bay Area, the peninsula, the blue glistening water. And it starts to curve in. And most of these passengers, it's probably, it's okay to assume that most of them had never been on an airplane before, you know. So they flew over the peninsula, saw the clouds parting. It was actually a beautiful, clear day that day. It was a beautiful, clear day, the kind of day every pilot wants, okay? Perfect. Everything was happening perfect. And the plane starts to sail now south, coming towards San Diego from Oakland, and it starts to curve its wings and tilt its wings inward a little bit toward the San Joaquin Valley, right, where we all get our fruits and vegetables from. So it starts to tilt its wings over that and fly over the Diablo Mountain Range. The Diablo Mountain Range is what separates Fresno County and the San Joaquin Valley from Monterey Bay. Okay, that's the strip of mountains there called the Diablo Mountain Range. And as it starts to sail over the Diablo Mountain Range, Frankie sees the warning light go off in the cockpit. It's a red light and starts to flash. Now, he actually stays cool and calm because he's flown that airplane. He actually was trained in this airplane, that he knew that airplane like the back of his hand. And in fact, he had seen that light go off twice before. He was a World War II pilot in this airplane. He'd flown this airplane over the most treacherous territories known to any pilot, called the India-Burma Hump. In World War II, you'd have to fly over the India-Burma Hump. And that hump, that area was like a graveyard for these airplanes. Airplanes crashed all the time. People were killed in that area all the time. The weather was so bad that you couldn't even use your instrument panel sometimes. You just had to kind of go on your instinct where you were going. Frankie had flown this same airplane over those areas. And twice before, he crash-landed this airplane on a single engine, right, and survived. The legacy, his sisters told me, you know, Frankie, one time, he was carrying a whole airplane full of fine china over that hump, and he crash-landed it on one engine, and he didn't break a single dish. That's the story of Frankie. So that's the pilot you would want in this situation, right? Somebody who's been there before. He knows that. Frankie sees the light go off. He actually remains pretty calm. He tells the co-pilot, Marion Ewing, go down the checklist, make sure we isolate the left engine, and feather the prop, feathering the prop. I didn't know all this stuff. This is crazy. But what happens is when an engine blows out, these airplanes are made to fly on one engine alone. When an engine blows out, if the propeller's still spinning, and it's face out like this, what happens is it starts to drag against the wind because now it's not spinning, right? So the airplane starts to turn. So instead of doing that, they do this thing called feathering the prop, where they turn the propeller onto its side. So now it can fly on one engine all the way. So they do that. He's running down the checklist. All of a sudden, the unthinkable happens. Smoke starts gushing out the side, and before he can even make his next move, the wing gets torched off. And now the wing goes sailing over Los Gatos Canyon like a feather. According to all the eyewitnesses who saw it, it floated over the entire canyon. The rest of the ship goes spiraling down, nose first, into Los Gatos Canyon in Fresno County. People are spilling out the side of the airplane. Eyewitnesses are standing there watching people flying out of the airplane at 5,000 feet, 4,000 feet, 3,000, 2,000. One old man named Red Gaston, he's standing there, and he notices the airplane's about to land in his property, so he starts to run after it to help anybody who's there. Red is the first person in the book who opens up the scene, and Red is running down the hill. He's an old man, and he's running with boots and all that, and he's chasing. And as he's running down, he's seeing papers flying everywhere and luggage flying everywhere. When he gets to the scene, everyone is annihilated. The plane dives nose first. And everybody, and this is an important fact, everybody who's in the airplane, because it hits nose first, goes all the way down into one fiery grave. Everyone unrecognizable, everyone annihilated. What happens next is what actually brings me here, okay? The newspaper reports catch wind of it. 100 see a wing fall off the ship, plunge to earth. The plane explodes in midair. 9 leap to death. We know they don't leap. They actually fell out. 32 die in a farm labor crash. They called it the worst airplane disaster in California's history up to 1948. So don't try and fact check me and call me on it later and say, actually, Mr. Hernandez, that wasn't the worst airplane crash, because people have done that. So in 1948, it was the worst airplane disaster. Okay? But what happens next is where we're all involved, all right? The reports go around the world, coast to coast first, and they name the 4 American crew members. Pilot Frank Atkinson, age 30, Rochester, New York, originally from Rochester, was a World War II pilot. His wife, Bobby Lillian Atkinson, age 29, from Rochester, New York. She was a bowling champion at her local high school at Rochester High. Frank Chaffin, immigration officer from Berkeley, California, left behind 2 sons and his lovely wife, Mary, was only 2 months away from retiring, Mr. Chaffin. And co-pilot Marion Ewing from Balboa Park left behind his young son and his lovely wife, Dorothy. And 28 deportees. 28 Mexican deportees. So none of the Mexicanos who were aboard, none of the passengers who were there, the braceros who were here picking our fruits and vegetables, none of them were named in any of those reports. Okay, not one of them named. Furthermore, what's worse, I don't even have beef with that. What's worse is not only were they called deportees in the media, but the remains of the American crew members were all shipped by train back to Rochester, New York. Frankie and Bobby went all the way back to Rochester, New York by train. Marion Ewing went to Balboa Park. Frank Chaffin went back to his home in Berkeley. His wife and children grieved, mourned. They had funerals for them. The remains of the 28 Mexican passengers were not sent back home to their respective communities in Mexico. They were actually piled into a mass and pushed into a mass unmarked grave in Fresno, California, Holy Cross Cemetery. And it would remain unmarked, and they would remain anonymous for almost 70 years. Now, all the way on the other side, it gets better. All the way on the other side of the country. Woody Guthrie should have a cape on him at this point. Woody Guthrie is a wonderful American singer-songwriter, and he didn't like this. Woody Guthrie was actually really big on names. He loved names. It's the power of names, right? Your name is, first of all, it's a symbol of who you are, right? But it also links us to the past, right? It links us to our past. It tells people what people we're from and where we're from. It's our connection. And Woody Guthrie believed the power of names. He had a song he once wrote years before this accident called The Sinking of the Good Reuben James. It was about a Navy ship that had crashed and killed like 80-something Navy men aboard, and nobody knew who they were, and so Woody Guthrie was singing their names. And that song took 20 minutes to sing, and his friends Pete Seeger and all them would say, Woody, why do we have to do that song? You're boring the audience. 20-minute song? Because you got to say all the names of everybody? And so they came up with a chorus instead. And the chorus goes, oh, what were their names? Tell me, what were their names? Did you have a friend on the good Reuben James? Oh, what were their names? So by the time he hears about this accident, he's pretty pissed off that they didn't get their names. So he writes a poem. How many of y'all write poems? Don't be shy, come on. Yeah, right, he writes a poem. And in his poem, he attempts to restore the dignity of these anonymous passengers by giving them fake names. He doesn't know who they are, so he gives them fake names. In his poem, he says, goodbye to my Juan, goodbye Rosalita, adios mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have a name when you ride that big airplane. All they will call you will be deportee. All right? Now, for those of you who raised your hand and said, I write poems, you know that sometimes that poems can live in obscurity for 9 years and nobody ever sees them again after you write them. And that's what happened with Woody Guthrie. The poem remained pretty much in obscurity in a shoebox, maybe someone's garage or someone's shed, and no one read it or heard it for about 9 years. Until one day, like great poems do, they see a little light, a ray of light comes in and touches them and sprouts a seed that grows. And that's what happened. A young man, a college student who was about 20 years old. Raise your hand if some of you are about 20 years old-ish. Yeah, all right. A 20-year-old college student sees a poem by Woody Guthrie. He sees it and it touches him. And so he says, I should probably write a song. I should probably write a melody for it. Because Woody Guthrie didn't actually write the melody for that. He just wrote the poem, the lyrics. So this college student by the name of Martin Hoffman, over there to the right, he's with his friend Jerry Davich here. Martin Hoffman decides to write that melody, and he writes it. And it becomes a song that we all know and love. And that song got recorded by Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson and Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash and Joe Raphael and a bunch of other wonderful folks all around the world. That song's been recorded in different languages and different countries. And that song carried the message that led me to it. In that song, the lyrics say, who are these friends? Woody is asking, me in 1957, he's saying, who are these friends, or 48, who are these friends, all scattered like dry leaves? The radio says they are just deportees. Who are they? Who are these people? Right. Now, I come from a family of migrant farm workers in the San Joaquin Valley, and because I decided to write some books, I thought, this is interesting. I wonder what happened to the people. I wonder what happened to them. I didn't know about this. And, I've been a card-carrying member of the Chicano community for quite some time. And I prided myself on knowing my own history, as I do. However, I didn't know this piece of history. And I learned that I wasn't the only one. Most Latinos didn't grow up hearing. This is not in the history books, this story. All right? But you know who did know about it? For all these years, the folk music community knew about this story. And they kept that story alive in this song. All right? So before I go on and share with you now what I found, what I discovered in my research, the people and the stories, before I share with you who they are, I want you to hear that song. So I'm going to bring back my friend Joel Rafael to do that song. Plain Reggae Los Gatos, Deportee. Let's a round of applause. Bring up Joel. Need some encouragement.
Yeah, and just a word about Woody. That poem wasn't just like one poem that got lost in a box, but Woody Guthrie, who died from Huntington's disease at age 55, he must have known that he didn't have a lot of time because he wrote over 3,000 songs and 3 novels and countless essays and poems. In fact, they said if he came to your house, he would probably write anything that could be stuffed in a typewriter would be stuffed in a typewriter before he left. Most of it would be in the trash can after he was gone. And some of those pieces of trash are still floating in to the Woody Guthrie archives from people that encountered Woody somewhere along the way. So he was definitely an iconic kind of person. This is a song. Know the song? Anybody heard this song before? Know the chorus, sing along with me. The crops are all in, the peaches are rotting, oranges are filled, slow dumps. Oh, they're flying us back to the Mexican border. All that money again. My father's own father waded that river. All the money that he made in his life. Brothers and sisters come work in the fruit trees, and they rode the trucks till they took down and died. Goodbye to my Juan, goodbye Rosalita, adios. Susie Maria, you won't have a name when you ride the big airplane. All they will call you will be serial eagle, others not wanted. Work contracts out. 600 miles to the Mexican border. Chase us like outlaws, like wrestlers, like thieves. Died in your hills, we died in your deserts. Died in your valleys, and we died beneath your trees, and we died in your bushes. Sides of the river, we died just the same. Goodbye to my Juan, goodbye Rosalita, mis amigos, Jesus Maria. You won't have a name when you ride the big airplane, and all they will call you will be. sky plane caught fire over Los Gatos Canyon. Fireball of lightning, it shook all our hills. Who are these friends, all scattered like dry leaves? Radio said they are for tea. It's the best way to grow our big orchards. It's the best way we can grow our good food. All like dry leaves and rot on your topsoil. Ain't known by no name except deportee. Bye to my one, goodbye Rosalita, adios mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. Won't have a name when you ride the big airplane. All ever call you. Goodbye, Rosalita, adios, amiga. To see me, won't have a name when you ride the big airplane. All they will call you.
Thank you, Joe. You know what is kind of funny, actually, is people have said, how did Woody know? He got 2 out of the 3 names right. Jesus, Maria. There wasn't the Juan, but Jesus y Maria. His odds are pretty good. Jesus, Maria. He went for Juan too, but sometimes that's a long shot, so you never know. How many Juans in here? Come on, Juan, raise your hand. None. See, there's one. All right. See, told you it's a long shot. All right. Thank you again, Joel, for singing this song. The Passengers. One of the things I knew that I would have to do in this book, because it was such a very depressing and sad and tragic story, was to find the light in each of the stories. When I would find one of the families, I had to find the light in the stories to contrast. Obviously, we know it's a tragedy. We know it's sad. But that's not what these people want to be remembered for. Right? We don't want to be remembered for the tragedy that our life ended with. We want to be remembered for the light we brought into the world. So I wanted to know about that light. I'm going to actually share with you now 4 of the stories, 4 of the different short stories of the folks who are aboard. But I think it's important first to say that when I began the search for this in 2010, think about that, 7 years ago, okay, in 2010, I wasn't trained as an investigative journalist. I didn't have any kind of formal training to do this kind of search. They call it research in academia, but it was a search. And really what it was curiosity. I was just a curious soul who saw a newspaper article. It's important to say that because we all have that power within us, all of us, to uncover these stories. And it is up to us, truly. So, I saw this newspaper article and I thought, what happened to the names? What are the names? They buried them. It was an immigration. It was the immigration who was transporting them. There's got to be a list of names somewhere. Somebody knows who they were. So I went, and when I discovered they were at this Holy Cross Cemetery buried there, I asked the cemetery worker, again, very sort of naively, I just went and asked, his name was Mr. Rascon. I knocked on the door and said, hey, Carlos, Mr. Rascon, I said, can you tell me the name, you guys have the list of names of the people you buried in that plot over there, where it says Mexican nationals? There was like a big sign, it just said 28 Mexican nationals died in a plane crash, January 28th, rest in peace. And he said, I know about that plot. He says, but I don't know. Let me look at the file. That's an old file. I said, okay. So he calls me 2 weeks later, and he says, meet me at the grave. I said, okay. So I meet him there, and he says, this is what we have. It's the file. I found it. But where the names should be 28 times, 28 different names, 28 times it just says Mexican National, Mexican National, Mexican National, which is on the cover of the book, Mexican National. That's the document he gave me. And then I said to him, Mr. Rascon, I said, I went over to the Fresno County Hall of Records because I know that that's where they keep our death certificates. Wherever you were born or die, that county keeps your records. So I went and I asked them if they would give me information about these passengers. And they said that I had to be related to one and that they would only give me information to that one person. I said, but you all, I kind of bumped him a little bit, nudged him. I said, you all got official business because you buried him here, maybe you should ask. And he said, that's a good idea. So he goes. 2 weeks later, he calls me and he says, meet me at the headstone again. I said, okay, great. I meet him there, and he has a list. He says they gave me the list of names, first, middle, and last name of each person. And I said, wow, that's incredible. He says, but the only thing is I think some of them are wrong. Now, I look at it, and I agree. Some of them look wrong. How do we know they're wrong if we don't even know who those passengers are? There are some pretty obvious errors, right? So the first name said Miguel Negroros Alvarez. And I said, I don't know a last name Negroros. Do you? He says, I never heard that. And I said, maybe what sounds like Negroros, a last name? Negrete, maybe? So I said, Negrete? He said, yeah, maybe it's Negrete. And we put a question mark. How about this other one? I said, all the newspaper reports say that there was only one Mexican woman, Maria Santana Rodriguez. Okay, we can't mistake Maria. Maria's, okay, that's a woman. All right. All the newspapers say there's one, but according to this official record, there are 3 women. There's also Guadalupe Laura Ramirez. And there's also Tomasa Aviña de Gracia and Maria. 3 women. And I said to him, well, what if this is an error too? What if Guadalupe, because that's one of those, back in the day, progressive unisex names, Guadalupe, you don't know, it could go either way. But what if maybe the middle name Laura is wrong, I don't know. Okay, so I put a question mark next to that. But what about this name Tomasa? Tomasa, what if it's really Tomas Aviña? Because sometimes what happened is that when you went, and during the Bracero program, when you get to the border, not often would you sign your own names, actually. You would say your name, and they would spell them, they would write, the officers there, the gatekeepers would write your name. So what if he heard, when the man said, what's your name? And the guy said, Tomás Aviña de Gracia, he heard Tomasa. Tomasa. Tomás Aviña. So he wrote Tomasa. I said, what if? It's a big guess. I don't know, but it's another question mark. Turns out that's exactly what happened. Later on, I'd find out that's exactly what happened. It was Tomás Aviña de Gracia. That was right. And it wasn't Guadalupe Laura. It was Guadalupe Lara, the last name Lara, with a stroke of a pen, one letter, the letter U. Guadalupe Lara Ramirez, the big, tall, stoic caballero from Charco de Pantoja in the state of Guanajuato, Mexico, with all kinds of children and a farm and all that, and knows how to plow his land, all that, becomes a woman. Guadalupe Laura Ramirez becomes a woman. Okay? And that's how it goes down in the official records. 3 women. Another man by the name of Apolonio Plasencia, they called him Apolonio Placenti. There were different, different spellings. So we said, this is wrong, this list is not accurate. I said, but I'm going to look for the name. So I continued. Now, after about a year and a half of searching, after that day, searching for a year and a half, as a writer, it goes against your instincts to do what I did next, which is, as a writer, you're taught, or not taught, but you're kind of told, hey, listen, when you're working on a book project, don't tell anybody your good ideas, keep them to yourself, and then, when the book comes out and everybody gets to know it, okay, cool, it's a good idea. But I couldn't do that with this project. I knew if I was going to find anybody, I had to tell the media, which went against everything. I'm not even kidding, guys. I was for a month pulling my hair out, going, I can't do this. I can't share it. I can't share it. I even called up other friends and said, should I share it? And they're like, come on, man. These guys have been silenced for 70 years. You have to share it. And I was like, all right, here it goes. Contacted my friend Juan Esparza from Vida en el Valle, the bilingual newspaper in Central California. And I told him the story, and I said, I'm looking for these passengers. He said, I'll run the story. So he did it. On March of 2013, the story came out in the newspaper. Now, it's a long shot. My dad used to tell me growing up, he'd say, Mijo, if it weren't for long shots, we would have no shot at all. So you got to go for it. Right? It was a long shot because that meant that it was a regional newspaper. What it meant is that those families would have to see it and have to still live in that same area. And they would have to also know the history of what happened for it to work. Well, week 1 passes by, the paper's off the shelf, my phone's not ringing like I thought it was going to ring off the hook, and then week 2, it's off the shelf. By week 3, the story is just, it's gone. And I was like, well, it ain't going to happen, I guess. But going into the 4th week, I get an email late one night, and it says, Mr. Hernandez, my name is Jaime Ramirez. I am the grandson and nephew of 2 of the passengers on that airplane. Not 1, but 2 of the passengers. If you need to know anything, let me know. If you need to know anything, let me know. That's what I read, and I said, wow, he knows, the families know. Now, what happens in these is you can't just get excited and want that person to be related. You have to actually now go and prove that they're related. That's the next step. So I called Mr. Ramirez up the next day, and I said, Jaime, Mr. Ramirez, I got your email. Man, thank you. How do you know you're the family? He starts to tell me. Then he says, why don't you just meet me at my restaurant? And I said, where's your restaurant? I said, I'm here in Fresno. Where's your restaurant? He says, I'm in Fresno. And I said, no kidding, you're right here in the same city. He said, yeah. He said, my restaurant is on the corner of Shaw and Blackstone. And I said, Shaw, would your restaurant happen to be, I think I know you're right, would your restaurant happen to be Ole Frijole? He goes, yeah, that's my restaurant, you know it? I said, man, my parents have been taking me there since I was a kid. It's the only Mexican buffet in town where you can get all the soft serve you can eat. I love your place. It's legendary. He goes, it is. I know, it is. It is legendary. Come on. So when I showed up, it was like I knew him already. And I went in with like 20 questions I have to ask him to prove that they're the family. But as soon as I got there, Mr. Ramirez Jaime and his brother Guillermo were there, and they had on the table spread out all the records, documents, death certificates, birth certificates, photographs of the family, and even the last letter that the passenger Ramon, their grandfather, wrote home to their grandmother before he was killed in that plane crash. He had all of it there. And I said, well, I don't have to prove anything. He's proven to me. And it's actually because Jaime Ramirez, not an author, minimal education, Jaime Ramirez collected his family's stories over the years. He collected it. Well, since he was 17 and he came in the back of a Mustang, he said, I had the letter and I had this old newspaper, and I came because nobody in my family knew where my grandfather and my uncle were buried. They knew where they were killed. They knew they were killed in a plane crash. Nobody knew where they were buried. So I came as a young man thinking one day I'm going to find where they're buried so I can tell my family back home. And he found the cemetery before I did, and he had all this information. And it was because of him doing his own family research that I'm here today with the book, and I found 7 other families because of what Jaime Ramirez gave me. So here it is. As I'm about to leave the conversation, Jaime Ramirez says to me, now, Mr. Hernandez, do you have a list of the names? And I said, yeah, I do have a list. I said, it's kind of got some errors and stuff. He says, oh, because I got a list too, but if you got a list, that's good. And I said, well, what list do you have? And he says, well, let me show you. Hold on. So he opens up this old, messed up, stained envelope, and he pulls out this messed up, old, tattered, wrinkled, yellow, stained newspaper that's like barely hanging in there. And he goes, here it is. And he lays it on the table like that, and it floats because it's so old. And he lays it on the table. And it's a Spanish independent newspaper published in 1948, only in Fresno County for the farm-working Mexican community. And it says, here is the list of everybody killed in that plane crash. And it has first, middle, and last name. But not only that, it says, and here is the list of their surviving family members. But not only that, it says, and here is their last known address in Mexico where they came from. And I was like, I don't have that list. I don't have that one. Can I touch it? I was like, don't touch it. It's old, man. It'll fall apart. Don't touch it. And he said, I think I've been saving it all these years for you. That's what he said. And it was with that single piece of newspaper that I began to search for all the families, calling Mexico, calling, everywhere in the United States. I went from Central California, where I'm from, to Colorado, to the Navajo Nation, actually, and then all the way to New York City, looking and following these clues since 2010 to bring to you and find the stories that I'm going to share with you. Oh, thank you. All right. Now, there's so many stories. There are only 4 up here, and I think what I'm going to do is because of time, I think I'm going to share with you my favorite one, and then I'm going to let you pick one other one, okay? And then that's it. We're going to do. But I'm going to actually flash through them here. Ramon Paredes Gonzalez, Jaime's grandfather, the one who wrote home a letter to his wife Elisa before he was killed 6 months, in which he says, Elisa, I'm sorry. He actually says, I'm sorry, Elisa. I spent the last bit of money I had here in the United States I was trying to gamble to win us more money, but it didn't work. He says, go ahead and sell all the garbanzos you have at home, and I'm sorry, you'll hear from me again. But his daughter is Caritina Paredes Murillo. She was 10 years old when her father Ramon was killed. And Caritina was standing. Actually, I'm not going to share with you that one. That'll be one. I'll just tell you. There's a father-daughter story is what the story's about. And her last, final, beautiful memory of her father. So that's one you can choose from. Jose Sanchez Valdivia. Jose Sanchez Valdivia was from La Estancia in Nochistlán, Zacatecas. Anybody here from Zacatecas? Yeah. Anybody here from Nochislan, Zacatecas? No. Oh, I was going to say. Anybody from last? Anybody named? No. That's coming up. I'm not kidding. Jose Sanchez Valdivia's brother is named Celio with the brown coat. He's actually, when I contacted him back in, like 4 years ago, he was here in San Diego when I contacted him. Celio's that man there sitting down with the brown coat. And he said, I was 5 years old when my brother Jose went to the United States with my father. I don't remember much of him, but there's a man in our community here who knew my brother, and his name was Don Guadalupe. We can go look for him. So when we were there in La Estancia, we went to find Don Guadalupe, who's there with the 2 canes. He was like strolling across the street with 2 canes and his little bag of like carne in his hand. He was like, I'm gonna go make my lunch. And so we found him, and Celio was like, Don Guadalupe, these men, they want to talk to you about my brother. So that's the story also, and that's a great story because Jose Sanchez Valdivia came to the United States with dreams of being a baseball player, an American baseball player. And the first thing we asked Don Guadalupe was, what do you remember about him? And he said, he tilted his hat back and he says, your brother loved baseball. That's all I remember. In Stockton, he would play there with the labor camps, and he made a team that would play against the Filipinos and play against the Japanese. And actually, to this day, there's a Mexican league out of Stockton that started in 1940, so he was a part of that original. So that's a baseball story. You can choose from that one also. I'm going to pass up this one because that's my favorite one I'm going to share with you right now. Frank Atkinson, the story of Frank Atkinson and his 2 beautiful sisters, Mary Lou and Helen, who have wonderful memories of Frankie being a World War II pilot, and some of those memories I shared with you also about him when he was a young man, and how he actually had really bad eyesight, and he ate carrots, like his mom would make carrot this and carrot that, and made a lot of carrots just so he could get his eyesight better, so he could become a pilot. And they denied him at first, but he kept coming back and eating more carrots and working out, and then he finally became a pilot. Let's see, okay. All right, so remember, those are your 3 stories, but I'm going to share with you first this lovely story of Luis Miranda Cuevas. That man there in the middle, the one looking straight, well, they're all looking at you. But the one who's looking at you like he's serious, like, what did you say? He's like, Luis. Okay, so in 2015, when I went to Mexico to do some of the research, I went with a small team of people. Guillermo Ramirez was one of them, the Ramirez family. He was like, I'm going to go with you. Are you kidding? And actually, he's the one who helped assemble the team there in Mexico. And we went traveling throughout central Mexico looking for families. But what we would do in advance of going, sometimes when we had enough information, we would make a contact. We'd call somebody who's there. So we called Jocotepec, Jalisco. Anybody from Jalisco? Yeah, probably, all right. Yeah. Jocotepec, anybody? No? Okay, all right. Well, it's down there by Lake Chapala. So we call Jocotepec, Jalisco, and we call the municipio's office, right, the governmental office there in Jocotepec, and we speak to a man named Pedro. Okay, Pedro Miranda Cuevas, and he says he's related to Luis. That was his great deal or something. And he says, when you guys get to Jocotepec, just come in. You don't have just come into the municipio's office. I'll be here, and ask for me. And we called him like a week before just to let him know we were coming. He says, all right. So you know where this is going, right? So we show up, we finally get to Jocotepec, and it's so beautiful. I'm feeling really proud of myself, and we're all feeling all happy. And we go into the offices, and we go up to the front lady at the front desk, and we say, we're looking for Pedro Miranda Cuevas. Pedro, yeah. And she says, okay, Pedro? So yeah, Pedro. Is Miranda Cuevas, does he work here? And she says, hold on, let me make a phone call. Sí. Pedro. Sí. No? Sí? No? Sí? Pedro no longer works here. We said, we just called like a week ago. She says, sorry, we let him go. He doesn't work here anymore. So we tell her the story, and we're like, please, like, put us in touch with him. That's why we came to talk with him. And she says, we can't give you any information. It's like, So she says, yeah. So we walk out, and we're walking around the placita there, walking around, looking around everywhere. And Guillermo says, now you want to go to the next town, or what should we do? And I said, no, let's walk around a little bit. At this point now, you got to just open up the heart and follow the instincts, the radar. You just walk around for a little bit. Let me walk around a little bit. You guys just walk over there, hang out. I'm just going to walk around a little bit. So he starts to walk around a little bit around the town. And just you don't know what you're looking for. You're just staying open. And then all of a sudden, like always, for me, I get attracted to art. And I see a big mural on the wall. And so I go over to that wall. And on that mural, it says Centro Cultural de Jocotepec. And I said, wonderful, the cultural center. And then I go into the cultural center. I go in there. And then I get there, and inside there's another beaming light Anybody want to be a librarian in here? You all should wear capes. If you want to be a librarian, you should be wearing capes. Librarians are the keepers of their community. They're the cultural keepers. All right? You don't know anything about a town that you go to the library first. The librarians tell you everything. So it says biblioteca, and I go, sweet. So I go into there, and the woman says, can I help you? So I tell her the story. We tell her. By then, Guillermo's, oh, there you are. I've been looking for you. Okay, well, you're here in the library. Of course, you're a writer. So he says, so we're all there, and we're listening to the woman, and she says, what's the name of the man you're looking for? And we say, Luis Miranda Cuevas. And she says, hold on, let me make a phone call. The librarian gets on the phone. What's going on? Luis, see? No? See? Okay. All right, listen. You're going to go out the door, make 2 lefts, make a right. It's the fiestas right now, so be careful. There's kids with fireworks, a bunch of stuff. You're going to make 2 lefts, another right, another left. And then you're going to get to a wall. There's a big wall there. And on that wall is a big metal door. Behind there is the elementary school. That's the elementary school. But that door, you're going to have to knock. No, you're going to have to pound on it, okay? Because the door is really hard. It's a big, heavy door. So you have to, and then they'll let you in, okay? So we go there. We find it. Boom, boom, boom. The door shakes. We're waiting. And a little latch goes, can I help you? We tell her who we are. We tell the person. They say, okay, hold on. They close the latch. We're waiting. I'm Irene Miranda Cuevas, or Irene Miranda Navarro. Can I help you? Yeah, we're the author. Yes, hold on, I'll let you in. And then she unbolts the big door. Come in. So we go in. This is a true story. I'm not even kidding. We were like, wow, waiting 5 minutes for her to unbolt the door. So she lets us in, and we're now sitting down in the principal's office, all of us. And we're looking at her, and she starts to tell all these stories about her tío Luis Miranda Cuevas, her tío. And principals, administrators, man, they're like multitasker. They should also have capes, She was like telling us the story as she's also taking phone calls and signing papers and responding to other people and all that. And what she was doing in between all that was she was calling family up. You gotta come. They say, they want to talk about my tío, yeah. By the time she's done telling us the story, there are 20 other family members in the office, and they're all looking at us. And when they're done telling their story of their tío Luis, she says, you have to understand, Mr. Hernandez, none of us were alive when Luis was killed. So these are all stories our families told us over the years, at holidays, just, anecdotes, stories. So, and I said to her, well, is there anybody who's still alive who might have known Luis? Anybody? And she says, no, that whole generation is gone. But then a little voice in the back, Casimira's still alive. No, see? No, see? Arturo says that Casimira's still alive. Oh, she's still alive. My tia's alive. Casimira's alive, yes. She's alive. I said, who's Casimira? First of all, that's a freaking cool name, Casimira. I'm going to say that, right? Casimira, almost sees. I started geeking out for a moment. I blacked out. I was like thinking as a writer, what a cool name. Because that's how memory works. You almost see, man. And I'm not even kidding. When we finally got to meet Casimira, the first thing, she comes out in a wheelchair, and she looks at me and she says, come closer. I can hardly see out my left eye. That's not even a joke. I was like, thank you. So we meet Casimira, and Arturo's so happy, and Arturo says, Tia, listen, you'll never know guess what these men are here for. You never know, guess what they want to talk to you about. She says, what is that? And he says, they want to talk to you about a really good friend of yours, Tia. And she says, which friend? And then he says, someone you know very well, Tia. That's which friend? She says, Luis. And before he finishes the name, she says, the one that died in the plane crash? He says, that's the one, Tia. Tell him. So he sits down. And she begins to tell us the story of how her and Luis met. Okay, now I'm going to share with you a piece of that interview. It's a great story. Every memory I have with Luis is a good memory. There are so many memories. Anyways, I also want to mention really quickly, too, that we're going to take some questions in a little bit here, okay? So we'll do a little Q&A. She says, every memory I have with... Oh, you're all going to read along? Okay. All right. I'm going to skip around, just letting you know. I'll wait. It's actually on page 38. A read along, Joel. All right. That is great. Okay, here we go. Every memory I have with Luis is a good memory. There are so many. We got along very well. And we did anything we wanted with him. Well, I mean, I did anything I wanted with him. She laughs. Not like that, no. See, I would make Luis cook, things like that. Yes, we got along so well. We complimented each other. That I remember very clearly. Now listen to this. You'll never guess. When we first met, Luis and I would make him dress up as a woman. And I would make him sew with me. Yes, that's what we did, believe it or not. I did this, well, because my father would kill us if he saw us together. And my sister would help me. Now, first of all, I got to point out Luis dressed as a woman. Look at his face. ¿Y qué? He's like, and Luis dressed as a woman. She says, and my sisters would help me. We would all sit side by side really close. You see, and Luis and I, we would sit in the middle and we would talk. And in order for my father not to see him, we would have to dress him up as a woman. And Luis would do it. He was adventurous, very much so. He was a fun person to be with. And he was willing to dress up like a woman just to get a chance to talk with me, to spend time with me. And that's how we did it. But I'll never forget this one time. And then she tells me how they got caught the first time. That's exactly how it happened. Luis didn't last but a few minutes before my father caught on and he chased us. Luis, he shoved my sisters aside and he ran to hide. We all ran and hid. One sister, she hid in the baby's crib. Another sister climbed on top of the bed. And me, I scrambled underneath the bed. My father discovered my first sister, the one who was in the crib. And boy, did he let her have it. And then he found my other sister in the bed. And I remember he let her have it too. And then he looked under the bed and he found me and he said to me, "Get out of there. Cara de dolorosa." That's what my father called me whenever he was upset. He would call me this nickname. He would punish me by calling me cara de dolorosa. And the reason why is because you see, my father, well, here's the thing I'll say. My father, he loved me very much. He never hit me, never. I'm going to tell you why my father never hit me, because you see, I was named after his own mother, Casimira. My mother would yell at my father all the time. She would say, "Why don't you hit her too? It's her fault. She's the one with the boy." And my father would reply, "Well, I can't hit her because it feels like I'm hitting my own mother." I know my name, Casimira, is an ugly name, but it worked for me because I never got hit. That's Casimira at the age when she had known Luis and they were in love and ready to be married. And that's her on the day that she told me that story when we found her there in Jocotepec. Okay, here's where you get to choose. Frank Atkinson, World War II hero, with his two lovely sisters, memories of him. You also get to choose Celio and Jose Sanchez Valdivia, the baseball player who came with dreams of being a baseball player. Or you get to hear the story and also the audio clip of Caritina speaking on her own voice, which is pretty powerful, and her father Ramon. So those are the ones. How many hands for Ramon Paredes and Caritina Paredes? Oh man, that's a no-brainer. Okay, let me just try it anyways. Let me see how many for Jose Sanchez, the baseball player. This dude in the middle is like, well, I already lost. And how many for the Atkinson story? Atkinsons. Okay, all right. We're gonna go then with the one I was hoping you would go with. The first time I met, this is actually a pretty short one, and then we're gonna take questions. Okay. The first. Oh wow. Hang on. I might not get to play the audio because where's Anthony? Yeah, my man, Anthony with the cape. How do you click on that little button? I usually do it from my laptop. All right, he's going to click it for me in a second, okay? So this is actually from the interview, but before you click it, let me set it up. You tell me when you're ready to click it. Anthony's he's taking his cue here. All right, so I'm going to tell you first how this happened. So Caritina and I sat down together with Jaime, her son, and I say to her, because I was telling you, remember about finding the light in these stories, I said to her, "Caritina, tell me your best memory of your father, your most fondest memory you had of your father." And she said, "My father would always sing a song." And I said, "Which song is that?" And she said, "Well, the song is La Valentina. I don't know why he sang that song," she said, "but that was the song he would always sing. Every time he would come home from Los Estados Unidos, every time he come from working, we knew my father was coming home because he would come up the path to our house with flowers from my mom every time, and he would sing the song at the top of his lungs, La Valentina." And I said, "I don't know that song. Can you tell me the lyrics?" And she says, well, yeah, she's kind of shy. And then Jaime, her son's like, come on, Mom, why don't you just sing it for him, Mom? Sing it for him. And she's like, no, sing it. Oh, you're crazy. And then she finally starts to sing the song that her father used to sing. This is actually from that recording, from that interview. I don't know. Where do you press? Oh, we should click it. Oh. I usually do it off of my laptop. What? Cable what? Yeah, you know what actually you can do is go back to the actual PowerPoint. All right, here goes. Yeah.
Que cantaba.
A ver, chile un pedacito de la canción.
See? All right, there it was. You hear it all? It was great, right? This interview was done in 2013 when she flew to Fresno.
Y le cantaba.
A ver, chile un pedacito de la canción.
Sí, por favor, por favor.
Cántesela, ¿qué tiene?
Ay,
Bueno, pues ese es...
Sí.
y le cantaba
La Valentina.
sí, porque me ves borracho. Mañana ya no me ves. Sí, porque me ves borracho. Mañana ya no me ves. Si es porque tomo tequila, mañana tomo Jerez. Valentina, Valentina, rendida estoy a tus pies. Si me han de matar mañana, que me maten de una vez.
So, well, let's see here. You guys got some questions ready? Because I'm going to show you the last thing, and then we're going to take a few questions. Let's see here. There we go. All right. Here we go. We go all the way back to her father, Caritina Paredes. Here's the photograph of the original funeral services in 1948. 28 caskets pushed into this, buried in this unmarked grave. Most of those caskets were empty. And they were labeled A to Z. And on the day that they buried them, they didn't bury all the caskets. They only buried 2 of them in front of the audience. The rest were buried later because it would have taken, they said, 2 days to bury all the caskets in front of everybody. All the people who were there, there were about 500 people there that day from the Mexican community, the farm working community. Not one of them knew any of the people personally who were buried. They went there to pay respect and tribute for their fellow brothers and sisters without knowing who they were. And there they remained at Holy Cross Cemetery. That's me in 2010 with the original plaque that said 28 Mexican nationals killed and pretty much anonymous, you know. But on 2013, we raised money from all around the world, from folk musicians like Joel Rafael going around, and my good friend Lance Canales, is a wonderful musician and redid that song also, with a lot of people from donations from all around the world, Australia, Italy. We raised $14,000 and we put a brand new headstone at Holy Cross Cemetery with all the right names, including the names of the American crew members who were killed, because erasure at any level is wrong. And then we have the story in English and Spanish. And then we have 32 leaves around the headstone for the song when it says, "Who are these friends all scattered like dried leaves?" And then in the foundation of the cement, there's actually the original plaque that's anonymous there. There I am with the descendants of the passengers who were killed at the actual plane crash site. The tree that's right behind us is where the nose of the plane hit at the bottom of that gorge there, at the bottom of that creek. The man on the right with a white shirt is Larry Haas. It was his grandfather, his Red Childers, the man in the book who's running down to save the family. It was his family's property. The man in the blue and the man and the woman in the yellow are that's Frank Atkinson's nephew. His name is Billy, and his niece Connie, Bobby and Frankie, the pilot and the stewardess. That's his family. And then Guadalupe here is named after his grandfather, Guadalupe, who was killed in the crash. And the rest are also family members as well. Guillermo, Don Leobardo, Lance Canales in the end here. So yeah, so they're all related. We took them to the crash site. This is the list I go around the country showing, but because of where you're located, because I'm here in San Diego, I'm actually going to show you all a different list, okay? This is the list of all the people who were killed in that crash. But the list I want to show you also involves you. Okay, of the 32 passengers, I've only found the families of 8. 8 of the families. The last family I found didn't make it into the book because I only found them about 2 weeks ago. They called me when I was at LAX and they said, Mr. Hernandez, I just found out that you've done this book and all this wonderful work, and I'm the family member of Francisco Duran Llamas, the third man down. I said, wonderful, so we've been talking and we just found her. And in fact, Francisco's father was an American, was a Caucasian American man who was with his Mexican wife at the time, and he's the product of that. But it's a great story that I'd love to at some point maybe write about. But the list I'm going to share with you is actually the more detailed list. I'm sharing you the list of the people we have not found yet, because the chances are pretty good that one of you might be related. If you see one of the last names up here from the same town that maybe your family's from, I want you to go home and ask your family about it. Okay? And then you contact me. That's for real. You contact me. I did this in Stockton, California in 2013. The same exact, actually at the time I had little strips of paper and I sent them around with all the names and I said, if anybody's related in this room, contact me. And they all kind of chuckled and giggled. And then an hour later when I left, I got a phone call and I found the family of passenger Tomás Padilla Marquez. It was that way. And they said, we're related. We're from San Julian, Jalisco, and we're the Padilla Marquez family. And so I would guess that they're between San Diego and probably Sacramento is where a lot of these folks were from and living. So they might have families still here. And a lot of them actually, some of the passengers were like in Mexicali and like Calexico, places like that also, which, they're from. So, does anybody see anything familiar?
My family's from Jalpa.
Jalpa? And what's your last name?
Ordorica.
Ask your family. All right. Okay, round of applause. Can you get the light? Anybody have any questions? And you're welcome to afterwards take a picture of this too before you leave too, okay? Anybody have any questions?
All my Cuentistas have questions.
Yes, there's a question here.
So my name is Roberto Raúl Mendoza Aguilar, and I just wanted to know, was there ever a point when you were researching that you just felt like, I can't do this now, or it's like you either hit a roadblock, you can't find anything, or was it just emotionally, like you couldn't handle more emotional distress or something?
Yes. Yeah, did I ever hit a roadblock in the research? He's asking, and if I ever felt like giving up all the time. All the time, not only did I feel like giving up, but I had so much doubt about myself and my abilities. I felt like I didn't go to school for this. I wasn't taught how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing, if I'm doing things the proper way or not. But then I realized, hey, I know what I don't know. And that's a pretty cool kind of awareness when you suddenly realize, I don't know the rules of the game, so I don't have to play by the rules of the game, right? I can call up anybody, walk into any place and ask for anything, and that's what I started to do. And then people would tell me no or turn me away, but then I started to know, most people said yeah, and they would follow the story. The only thing I had to is I have a strong faith. My spirituality is pretty strong, and I believe that this is actually a calling in a way. It was a door that opened that I was supposed to walk through. And when you believe that way, then nothing stops you. Even that fear that I had as a writer to say, I can't put the story out into the world without writing it. So I had to put my writer hat aside and say, it's not about a book. It's about people and lives. That's more important before anything else. And so, that's why it took me 6.5 years really of all the research, and I'm still looking for families, but very much so. I doubted myself the whole way and doubted my abilities. At one point even feeling like I should probably hand this project over to somebody who has more experience, give them all my records and information that I have, but every time I share that with a friend or somebody, they'd say, you're crazy, the world opened that up for you, like you have to walk through that door. And so Yeah. And even to this day, I still doubt some of my abilities. Like, it's like, am I doing this the right way? I could be doing more. So, yeah. It's always, you just kind of keep working through it. Yeah. Yes.
My name is Andrew King, and thank you for sharing this story. And where you're talking about the faith right now, and it's really cool. You run into that place, and you're like, well, where's he at? Rather than just leaving, you
Yeah.
went outside, like looking, and you were led to this right place.
Right.
I'm curious if you could share, just like briefly more, like what is your spiritual faith?
Oh, well, I mean, what do you mean exactly? Be specific for me.
Oh, just playing off of what you just said, like you have a faith that gives you the
Yeah.
ability to go beyond what would, like people would say, like, oh no, you can't get that information, that you remain
Right.
focused.
Right. I mean, just generally speaking, I was raised Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and growing up that, and then later on, I actually very intentionally attended a Buddhist school because I felt like it was a strong connection that I had growing up with the sort of the vertical connection I had, and I wanted a strong connection with the sort of horizontal world, with things around me. And so I began to look at everything that way, the connection above and then the connection to everybody here. And if those two are somehow not aligned for me, if those two things are not, then for me that was one of the foundations. But then later on, I started to pay attention to writers like Henry David Thoreau, and especially a lot of indigenous writing as well, when it came to how we as a people are directly interlinked with nature and the natural world. For me, that was probably one of the most powerful realizations, and moves on my behalf to like make that an intentional part of my life. And, when I look around and I think about things, atrocities, even like hurricanes and all of that, there's something necessary about them. As tragic as they are, there's still something necessary. And for me, I always felt like where there's the bad, there's the good, and those two things are inextricable. And I feel like that's how I have to kind of go around when I'm doing this kind of work. Every time I'm going to sit down and interview a family, I understand that I'm entering a very kind of a liminal space. I'm entering a place with these interviews that I don't know where it's going to go. I have no idea. It could turn sour really quick. Some of them could kick me away, kick me off, and get them. And in fact, one family did. One family did, not rudely, but basically told me, we don't want you to write the story in your book. Don't do that, and we're not going to share anything with you. And I respected that. But also like I said, where there's this human tragedy, there's also this light, and so that was my job. And that's how I kind of approach all of the way I go about things. When I have to go to the canyon and the crash site, I would have to trespass. I trespassed, and I felt like some of these, I felt like it was my job to trespass. That's the truth. People in the canyon would say, you shouldn't go up there. People hunt up there, like they hunt up there, in that territory. And I said, well, I thank you for saying that. I would take precautions. I wasn't dumb. I take precautions. I would actually, every time I go into the canyon, I would print out this giant piece of paper and put it on my car right by where I jumped the fence. And that paper would say, Lisa Janilla, the geologist here, and David Schreiner, who lives across the street, and Dolores Crabtree, who lives down the street, know I'm here. I'm the author who's searching the plane wreck at Los Gatos Canyon. That's all, and I put that on my window so people knew that I knew people who were there. They knew that. So if they passed by, they'd stop and they'd see that and they'd kind of cruise by. And at one point, a man came down, I remember, and he had on his motorcycle over this hill, and he had this shotgun. He just kind of stared and looked at me. And I said to him, come here, I want to talk to you. And he just kind of turned around and drove off, so. But I wouldn't be able to do any of these things, I think, if I didn't have a strong faith or strong spiritual connection to this work. It's a long-winded way of saying that.
Hi, I'm Daisy Ponce. I was just wondering, you kept talking about the Bracero
The Bracero program.
Could you elaborate on what that is briefly?
Sure. The Bracero program was a guest worker program that was actually the result of a conversation between President, I think it was Avila Camacho at the time, and Roosevelt. They were having conversations about how Mexico could be an ally to the United States during World War II. And the result of those conversations was the Bracero program, which then, they would set up recruiting centers in central Mexico or throughout Mexico, but at first in central Mexico, and they were sending in Mexican workers to come and pick in the field, to work in the factories, to work on the railroads, all those kinds of things, while the boys and women here in the United States were off to war. Right? As soon as that program ended, as soon as the war ended, the program, they started to send back or repatriate the braceros, en masse. One of the things I asked the Mexican consulate in Fresno, I interviewed him and I said, why did they not send home the remains of the Mexican passengers? And And he said, there's probably two. He says, I don't know. I wasn't born even at the time, he says, because he's a new consulado. And he says, but I can probably guess two reasons. One is, what would they have sent home to who? How do you know who belongs to who? It was such a mess. Then I said, then what did they send home to Rochester? And what did they send home to Berkeley and to Long Beach? I shriek when I think about maybe Guadalupe or Ramon ended up in Rochester, New York, And it wasn't about what they sent home, but the fact that these families were able to, have closure. And he says, yeah, that's true. And then he says, the other thing might have been too expensive to send all those bodies home, And I said, well, I don't buy that, because in 1948, sent home, they repatriated by train over 200,000 Mexicanos by train that year. They couldn't fit the remains of 28 more, put them into a train and send them home. And he says, yeah, good point, I don't know.
When learning about the Bracero progress in history, did it anger you? And if it did, how did you cope with it?
No, it didn't anger me, because I was already aware that these things were existing, these kinds of injustices and the treatment, the poor treatment. That didn't anger me. I was mostly surprised or appalled by the fact, not even with the newspapers calling them deportees, which that's one level of, okay, come on now, the generalization sucks. But what was more appalling to me was that we had access to the names of these passengers for 70 years and nobody ever put them on a headstone. That to me was the real tragedy, right? That's like, the newspapers, the newspapers, but the humanity behind, who those people were, and everybody deserves to be buried with their name. That didn't happen. That's the part of me that was like appalling. Of course, the church there doesn't like that I go around saying that, but that's what happened, They had access to the names, they did, and they never found it. And strangely, the Mexican consulate was also there at the funeral services, and they were buried, and the Mexican consulate never, I don't know, but I'm assuming the Mexican consulate never made them accountable to put the names on there, so. Yes.
I wanted to know, for each of the stories, how did you put so much detail into them? Did you have to use your imagination a little?
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad that you're bringing that up, because there are reenactments in the book, right, which we call fictionalizations. But I had to make an argument to the Library of Congress because they wanted to call the book fiction, and I said no, it's not fiction, right? I said, okay, we'll make a compromise and call it a documentary novel. And the reason why is because when we see a documentary film, right? When we see a documentary film, like when Ken Burns, for example, tells us the first pilgrims arrived, we don't really know what those conversations were like. Nobody knows, right? But why do we entrust? Why do we suspend our disbelief and our judgment? Why do we suspend it and trust that this is probably the closest reenactment of what happened? Because we know that Ken Burns has experts who have studied and scholars who know the history, people who have collected journals from those times or renderings, and that is probably the closest thing we can get to what really happened. And we're okay with that because then we get to share a three-dimensional space with the people. That was more important to me, not the data that I collect and tell you about who these people were, but I wanted people to share three-dimensional space with these people who were killed. So to do that, I had to reenact things. Now, these reenactments were not written because I just, out of the top of my head, wanted to fictionalize something. They were actually constructed based on interviews. People would tell me, like the photograph Micaela made Guadalupe take, Guadalupe hated that. He hated wearing clothes all the time. They would tell me stuff like, he hated wearing clothes. I can't even imagine that he wanted to wear that. Look, that even fits him too short. And, Micaela always made him do this and that, and she made him take. So they would tell me these things. So I recreated the scene of when he takes the photograph based on these stories. But I allow myself, because what happens when somebody's telling you a story? Your mind can't help but you see it in your head, right? Your mind can't help but play it out. So I said to myself, why not allow that to be part of the book? I'm going to write, as they're telling me the story, I can see it in my head, and so I'm going to write that and put that in the book too. So then we, as readers, get to live with these people and see them walk and breathe and hear their voices, So that was the intention behind doing those, yeah.
My name is Robert. When you're interviewing, what family did you feel most connected with? Was there a specific family that gave you the most information, or was just crying?
Yeah, the family I probably connected with most is the Ramirez family. Jaime Ramirez and his brother Guillermo. They're really close friends. I call them brothers now, because we've become very close. Guillermo, went with me to Mexico. It was really a cool thing, not just as an author, and I was very intentional. There's actually going to be a documentary we're working on right now, because we've been filming this since I started to research in 2010, and the documentary will come out next spring. But you'll see in the documentary what happens is when I went to Mexico, it was like, okay, I can go as the author to bring all my contraptions and photos, cameras, and all that stuff, and listen and try and write whatever I can. Or if I bring Guillermo and these other families who are a part of this along, and having families interviewing other families, and I would prep Guillermo as we're driving, let's ask these questions, let's ask this, and we'd sit down and Guillermo would start talking, and then it would be a conversation between families and I just got to sit back then and just witness everything and take everything in. Even if they're having a conversation, I can see the surroundings and Casimira's house and what that looks like, and I could do all this instead of having to be engaged in the conversation. But Guillermo was really, because of those things, Guillermo Ramirez and Jaime Ramirez were really, they've done whatever it takes. They've gone with me to Tulsa, Oklahoma. They've gone with me, traveled with me to some of these events and do talks with me too. So yeah. How did I find funding? Man, that is an important question. What's your name? Eric. He's on point. How do you find funding? Yeah, that's crazy. My tia said to me, Mijo, who pays you to do all this? And I said, God, tia. I hope, That's the truth. There was from 2010 to 2015, I never had funding. It was always from my own pocket. But what I did have was privilege. And I want to point that out because I was already a published author. So what would happen is this. Somebody, for example, in Colorado Springs would say, Tim, can you come out and do a talk? And I'd say, yeah, okay. And I'd say to that college in Colorado Springs, can you get me also a talk in Grand Junction, Colorado? If you fly me to Colorado Springs, can you get me one in Grand Junction? They'd say, sure. Then they would get me a job in Grand Junction. So whenever I'd fly to Colorado, I would pass this little town called Carbondale, where there was the family member of one of the people, and I would sit down for a day. I'd go a day early, and I'd sit there and talk with them and interview them, and then I'd go do my job and then fly home. I did that with the Navajo Nation. I did that in New York. Every time I would make myself little jobs here and there, just so that way others could fly me to these places, so that way I could record. But I couldn't pay for it myself, and oftentimes I did. A lot of it was just my own money out of my pocket, and finding really kind of resourceful ways of getting into the spot that you need to be. And then also a lot of friends, a lot of help, generous strangers who didn't know me would put me up in their house, feed me, things like that. So it was really the help. If you share the story, the power of community comes together. It's incredible. I'm not even kidding. And I'm not just talking about this, great story. I'm talking about your own stories, your own families. Whenever you need help with something and can't figure out a way, share these stories, and suddenly you'll see the gap opens. The community opens bigger for you. It's interesting. So it's also a lot to say. That's how I met Joel, in fact. Joel Rafael that way too. He's one of those folks who just came into the community and was helpful from the very start. He said, he never asked for anything. He just said, how can I help? I'm a musician. What can I do to help? That was it. So thank you, Joel, for that. Another question. Maybe two more questions then.
As you find more stories from you, write another book?
Will I write another book? I don't know yet. I don't know yet. I also like to paint a lot, and I do stage stuff, and there's a lot of things I want to do. So these stories can exist in other ways. I don't know if I'll write a book yet. And honestly, I didn't even think about that until, you're talking specifically on this story. I didn't think about that until 2 weeks ago when I got this other phone call, and I go, oh crap, now I got to do something with this information. What do I do? For the first thing I'm going to do is record their story. I'm going to sit down and document it and record it and file it away and keep it there. And then after time, I'll let it breathe a little bit and see where the inspiration takes me. One more question? Yeah. That's the most awesome hand raise I've ever seen. This hand don't want to do it, but this hand's going to make it. Let's go.
So is it Topic Nayarit or Tepic Nayarit?
Oh, I don't know. It's Tepic. Yeah, you're right. That's a typo. Good call. Yeah. Do you know? Are you from there?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Is your last name Mercado or? Okay. Well, maybe. Look it up. Okay, ask your family. It's Tepic. Yeah, you're right. It's a typo. I've been called out on that one before. I still haven't corrected it. Okay. Joel, thank you so much again, Joel, for your wonderful music. Maria, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Tim. Let's give Tim and Joel another round of applause. One last round of applause. So we're also going to open up the space for book signing and book vending. So if anyone wants to purchase a book, I know that all my Puentistas have their book. They were even reading along, which is super awesome. It's like a teacher's dream come true. And they were prepped. I also want to recognize a couple of people. So first, I'd like to recognize the college president, Dr. Sunita Cook. So thank you so much, Dr. Cook, for coming today and being with us. And our academic senate president, Susan Herman. Thank you for supporting. Who used to be a Puente instructor many, many years ago, too. So we have a legacy here. We have a legacy, an important legacy of writing and of storytelling and preservation of our history, yeah? So thank you so much once again, Tim, Joel. We welcome you to stay and get your book signed. And then at 11 o'clock, we're going to be right next door at the Social Justice and Equity Center, which is a collaborator and sponsor and supporter of the talk today. And we're going to have a little mini reception. So we welcome you to also join us. Puente students, I'll see you over there. Okay, gracias.